Everybody, coming up on Capitol tonight, a North Carolina Republican senator is not happy with a new funding request from the White House. The reason? It doesn't include money for Helene recovery in the state. I'll talk to another Republican from North Carolina about that. Plus, a busy week at the Supreme Court and increased tensions between the president and Senate Republicans will be at the center of our reporter roundtable with two Spectrum News journalists. And has America's 250th anniversary become too political? We'll get into that with our reporters. They'll join us right here at the table. And President Donald Trump is responding to an Iranian strike on a vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. We'll take a look at what he's saying and break down the framework deal between Israel and Lebanon. That is all coming up on Capitol tonight. It starts now. Happy Friday, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here on Capitol tonight. I'm Ruben Jones in our Washington studio this evening. Hope you're doing well. Republican Senator Ted Budd says he will vote against any supplemental funding package from the White House until it includes additional funding for Helene recovery. The White House asked Congress to approve nearly $88 billion in emergency spending earlier this week. The request included more than $21 billion for the Defense Department to help cover costs related to the war with Iran, money for Ebola response, nuclear security, and aid for American farmers, but zero funds for North Carolina's Helene response. I spoke with Republican Congressman Greg Murphy about that question of Helene recovery aid, as well as a number of other topics concerning North Carolina. Here's our conversation. All right, and Congressman Greg Murphy joins us now from our Raleigh studio to talk more about some of the big stories happening in the news right now. Congressman, good to see you, sir.
You too. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with something we started the show with, which was this announcement by Senator Ted Budd talking about this White House supplemental funding package that focuses on Iran and a number of other items. But the senator is concerned that this funding does not include additional money for Helene recovery in Western North Carolina. And until he sees Helene money in that, he's not going to support any supplemental funding package. It is rare to see Senator Budd disagree with the White House. Yep. Do you agree with the senator?
Yeah, I do actually, Ruben, because, you know, the state has so far received, my understanding is about $9 billion already in aid. Some estimates in this thing put us in $30, $40, $50 billion, the cost for Hurricane Helene. In fact, Senator Budd and Tillis and I went out there on Monday, I believe it was, after the Friday hurricane, several years ago. And it's a disaster area. This is going to take a decade. And so we have to put a line in the sand. There needs to be more money for Western North Carolina. In fact, I was speaking with Representative Chuck Edwards, whose district is primarily the one affected out there. And Chuck has been working very, very hard to get the resources out there, working with the governor's office, working with everybody in the state, as well as with the federal government. But we need to get the resources out to Western North Carolina, really, that they need. And so I stand with with Senator Budd in having this demand.
Okay, so you will not support any supplemental funding package unless it has additional Helene funding in it.
Well, let's just put it this way, Ruben, I'm not one of these people that draws lines in the sand and does this other stuff for, demonstrative purposes. I'm going to follow his lead. I'm going to follow Chuck Edwards' lead, because I think we need to stay united as a North Carolina delegation, Republican and Democrat, to make sure that Western North Carolina is taken care of.
Well, there was a recent meeting with the governor and the entire delegation, Democrat and Republican. I believe at least most of the members were there, where the governor put forward about a $10 billion proposal. That's less than what he had originally put forward a few months ago, because the state has been getting more money than it had been getting. You agree with that number, about $10 billion the state should be getting?
Well, it had, to your point, it had been $13 billion, and then the governor's office had to go back and recalculate, and they understood they were actually getting money. I think that's a reasonable estimate. Talking with Representative Edwards last night, he actually had a number that was a little bit lower. You have to try to find the sweet spot. This is not an immediate fix. We need to get the money where it needs to be sooner than later. I'm frankly upset that it's taken this long to get as much as it is resources out to the western part of the state. I don't know the particular machinations as to the exact amounts of where they need to go. I'm following the folks who are over there in that part of the state, following their lead and trying to support them. I'm out the East, they've supported us so many times when we get affected by hurricanes. So I think, we're in a state all together. I think the East, West, middle part of the state needs to be supportive of where disasters occur. And at this point, the folks in the western part of the state really are suffering.
The president upset some Republicans this week when he had this bipartisan housing legislation to help people afford housing, build more affordable housing. He was all ready to sign it. There was a ceremony ready to go in the Capitol, and the president abruptly pulled out of signing it, saying that he wants to pass separate legislation before he does this. Was that the right move?
That would not have been my preference, Ruben. I think we had a great bill, one that was worked out really between the Senate and the House. Chairman Hill, who heads that committee, really worked very hard with the Senate to try to take out some of the, truth be told, some poison pills the Senate had sent over. So I think it was a very, very good piece of legislation. I found it unfortunate the president pulled it. He had his particular reasons. That would be not be my preference. The bill is now set in motion, so it goes into law in 10 days. If it does not have the president's signature, it's my understanding, and he has a chance to veto it. Hopefully he won't do that. I think it's really critical because the bill provides for a marked decrease in the regulatory burden that has been put ridiculously on those building houses, those receiving houses, works in a financial framework to make things more affordable for individuals. Huge housing crisis, and we need to attend to it. And I think this is a good bipartisan, bicameral effort.
Well, the president has said that he wants to get this Save America Act passed, and that's why he's not supporting this. Yeah. Save America Act requires people to show voter ID, which is supported by a lot of Americans, but what it does is it takes it a step further, and it requires a form of identification, so things like your passport or your driver's license, and that's where it gets controversial. Congressman, this does not have a future in the Senate. It's not going to pass the Senate. Yeah. Is the president mistaken to be focused so much on this that you set aside other issues?
Ruben, I think that if you look at what happened, and, just to tell you, be reality, we had 15 or 20 million people come in the country during the last administration. We don't know who they are, where they're gone, what they're doing. We need to make sure that the vote is by Americans for America. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, a lot of these folks have left the country or been deported, but making sure that our voting apparatus is pure is something that is important, that the Americans understand they're voting. That said, I do think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We have some folks who love their celebrity status in the House that are pulling the same kind of nonsense. They're saying they're not going to support anything else until we get the SAVE Act back. Well, this is a Senate issue. Personally, I'd like to do a lot with health care, work on affordability, making sure that we take care of those who do take care of patients. There are many other different avenues, small business, et cetera, et cetera. I think that we can be working on at the same time. And so I don't want to withhold this. Again, the president went over and spoke with the senators. It's a couple senators who are not voting for this. I don't see the reason for the House to be held ransom at the same time we're trying to get this done in the Senate.
Well, let me ask you what I asked Senator Tillis a few weeks ago. Are you worried when the president endorses Republicans in the Senate that are not currently in the Senate? So I'm thinking the opponent, Ken Paxton, the opponent to John Cornyn. He doesn't endorse Bill Cassidy. Yeah. Does it result in a party that is not big tent party, where if you disagree with the president, you are excluded from the party? Is that a concern for you? Yeah,
we've seen politics on a little bit different level with President Trump than perhaps we have seen literally since, since President Obama, who weighed in heavily on some of these things also. It does change the dynamic. I do have to say that, we're all elected to represent the people, and regardless of whether we're coming back or not, we have a job to do to our constituents who put us in office. And so I have to say to those individuals who are, because they're not coming back, who feel a little differently, I think you have to refresh yourself, say, hey, why are you here? Who sent you here? You're still representing them and still representing the country, trying to take the personal politics, which is nasty business. It's a horrible, horrible business. Try to take that out of that, and remember, we're in the business of serving our constituents and the country, and that's what comes first.
All right, coming up here, we're going to take a look back at the busy week in the